If you wanted to start a culture like this at home, it's very simple. All you have to do is, particularly using wholemeal flour, put some wholemeal flour in a jar, maybe a little white. They particularly like rye flour as well, and add some water. Ideally, I think it's better mixing by hand, but just getting it to a light running batter mix. And all you have to do is let this mix sit on your bench in your kitchen for 3 or 4 days, and put a gauze over it to keep the insects out. But we're surrounded by the lactobacillus bacteria because we're breathing them out all the time, and the yeasts that work with these are in the atmosphere as well. They will start to work in there. After 3 or 4 days you'll see bubbles. Once it gets to that stage, you take a spoonful out into a clean jar and do the same thing I just did to refeed them. And these little fellows, once they get going, will use that food on a bench within a day. So you have to keep feeding them or put them into the fridge at that stage. But if you keep thinking of it like that, it's a living culture. You must feed them, and I think at about 25 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit or centigrade, they double in number every half hour. So they very quickly use up their food source if they're not refrigerated to slow them down. This leaven is not quite as active as when we make bread, but you can see the bubbles forming there. Bread, yeah. The bread that you buy generally in Australia, commercially in supermarkets, has just gone down the way of, I don't know, it's just been turned into a commodity. So all the goodness or the reasons for doing things in a certain way have just been lost. So you just get stuff that's full of, it's very poor flour for a start, it's full of chemicals to make it last, it's full of other additives to make it go through machines and stay soft and all these sorts of things. So consequently what you end up with is people who don't know how to use and respond to real bread. And that's a big part of what we do, is having to educate people about what real bread is again. Because we have people from Germany and those countries with longer bread traditions coming in and buying our bread, and they'll buy it the day after it's been baked and take it home and just sit it for 2 or 3 days before they start to use it, because they believe the flavour doesn't develop for that time, and they're quite content that it may dry out some because they know how to use it. You know? And the sad thing is we've forgotten that all those sorts of things like bruschettas and these sorts of things were developed to use drier bread. And so I think we really have to revisit a lot of those European traditions and whatnot to get back to, you know, re-educate ourselves about real bread and how to use it.
Molding the strength into my day. That's what I'm doing now. Right, bread. This is going to be bread, this. Which we're going to cook later on tonight. About 9 or 10 o'clock tonight. I'll cook this bread. I'll mix this up about 1:30. gonna have a nice long ferment. This dough's quite wet. It's very strong dough. It's good dough. So just give it a stretch. I just stretch the gluten out a little bit. Stretching the gluten strands. And I fold to strengthen. So I go up and over. Same on this side. Up and over. That one in. Folded.
So what we've done now is surround the whole oven, where the oven is made of fire bricks, about this deep, then about 6 or 8 inches of concrete around the whole oven, and now we've put a cladding of iron around that about a foot out from the oven, and that'll be filled with vermiculite, which is expanded mica. I think they mined it out at Kilcoy, superheat it, and it blows up into an insulation. The idea of that is that when you fire the oven, the heat actually goes into the bricks and concrete, and with the insulation there, it can't go any further, so it builds up and builds up in the concrete and bricks, and so then when it settles down, it slowly seeps back into the baking chamber. So if we didn't do this, the heat would just keep going out through the concrete and dissipate, and we'd probably only get 1 or 2 bakes. This way we'll probably get 10 to 12 hours of baking. What you've got when you have a normal yeasted loaf of bread, there's a few differences in what happens. The yeast that's being used was originally developed from breweries, so they call it brewer's yeast or baker's yeast, and it's an alcoholic fermentation. So what you actually have happening when you put yeast into a dough is those little creatures basically just use the sugars to create bubbles that blow up the raw flour, and so you've just got expanded raw flour that you then bake. In a naturally fermented loaf, what you have is these lactobacillus bacteria working along with these free-floating yeast from the atmosphere, and we're getting these into our food all the time, so we're used to these strains of yeast in our food because they're on our hands, they're on every bit of food that we eat, so we're used to them being in our bodies. And those natural yeasts actually change the flour into the sugars that the bacteria then use in the whole process of changing that flour into things that our bodies can digest. So it's almost a pre-digestion similar to what happens in our mouth and on the way to our stomach. And all sorts of things are happening. The maltose is used up, which is one of the things in wheat that people react to. A lot of the proteins are changed into more usable, more directly assimilated things our body can use. Like many of our other fermented processes that have been thrown out, this was thrown out because it was long-winded and difficult to use. It's not as immediate as using a yeasted dough, but we threw them out because we didn't understand that they not only they actually enhanced our food, and so many of our fermenting processes we replaced with chemicals and refrigeration and things like that, not understanding that they also enhanced our food, made our food, put enzymes into the food that we don't get otherwise, and all those sorts of things. So this is just what we're actually doing, is developing from a raw flour a food that is much more accessible to our bodies. And if we go further down the track where we actually get rid of the phytic acids out of the flour as well by malting, you get an even better a better loaf of bread. There's a lady just up the road here who's sprouting the bread, the grains before she mills them, and that's the ideal. But as we learn more about it, there'll probably be other refinements we can make as well.